Hi, I'm Nate Bronner with the Virginia Cooperative Extension and the Master Gardener Program, and I'd like to welcome you back to my garden. Today I'd like to talk to you about vertical gardening. Now, it's just before Memorial Day weekend in York County, and everything is just going crazy. You can see in the bed behind me here that my dill and my cilantro and my other plants are just doing great. They benefited from having row covers over them, but now that it's warming up, it's time for those row covers to come off. I've taken them off, but I've left the PVC piping in here. If you'd like to see plants just take off like this in your garden next year, stay tuned. Later on this year, towards the fall, I'll do another video on row covers and how we can all benefit from them. But for right now, I'd like to talk about vertical gardening. Vertical gardening is a great way that you can achieve several things at once in your garden with minimal effort. I have in front of me my bed that I plant my peppers and my tomatoes in. Now, as you can notice, my tomatoes are doing really nicely and they're starting to sprawl out and take over this bed. And if I were to let them do that, they would take over and I just have a really untidy garden. It would be hard to notice when things are coming ripe. The plants would interfere with each other because they'd be competing for the sunlight, and it wouldn't work out that well. But when I pull these plants up and when I get them off and get them to grow up, not out, there are several benefits to that. Number one, when plants are down against the bottom, against the ground like this, they have reduced airflow. The air coming through here doesn't flow as nicely, and because of that, it's easier for mildew to set in, it's easier for other diseases to set into the plants and negatively affect them. But when I bring them up and increase that airflow through there, they do a lot better. It also lets me identify pests very easily when they get onto my plants. I can identify if pests are getting onto my tomatoes because they're up here at my level. I can notice them on the underside of the leaves, whereas if they're down here, I might not be able to notice that pests are getting onto the leaves of my plants. It works not only for tomatoes, but it works well for the cucumbers that I have planted over here. It works well, as you can see over here, for the peas that I have. And over here, I'm going to have some green beans. I'm going to have some pole beans, and they're going to grow up, and I'm going to be using the same techniques for those that I'm using for these. The other thing it does is it helps me with the harvest. It's easier to notice when the things are up at your level and going up, whether the fruits and the vegetables that you're ready to harvest are ready and ripe for you to take off of there. If they're down on the ground, it's a little bit harder to see them. And vertical gardening works really well with raised beds. It's a natural complement to them for keeping it all tidy and together so you can easily access your garden. So what do you need for it? Well, you need a couple things. The first thing that you need is sturdy trellis material. Now, in a lot of garden centers and big box stores, they'll try and sell you a conical shaped tomato cage. Those work very well for very, very few tomatoes. Most indeterminate tomatoes like these will very quickly overrun that and it won't be any use for them at all. For some of the smaller dwarf determinate tomatoes, those tomato cages might work very well. But in this case, I need something a little bit sturdier than that that's going to hold up to wind and is going to be able to support the weight of these. And to do that, I use rebar, I use conduit, and I use netting. The rebar that I use looks like this. It's 1/2-inch rebar that's 2 inches long. And I use this in the corners to hold up and provide more structure to the conduit that I'll be using. The electrical conduit that I use is 10 feet long and it's a 1/2 inch in diameter. This is a small portion of it. I can use this and bend it into shape with a conduit bender like this by putting it in the conduit bender, and you can actually bend steel with your bare hands and you don't even need to have a cape. You can bend this conduit and bend it into shape to suit your purposes. Behind me, you can see a 10-foot length of conduit that I have bent into shape as a small low trellis for my sugar snap peas. Those low trellises work very well, but obviously for my tomatoes that can grow very, very tall, that would be insufficient to the task. So I need something a little bit bigger. Then the next thing that I need is I need something to go in between the conduit, which is going to form the frame of my trellis. An easy thing to use is this nylon netting that you can buy. Comes from a variety of different manufacturers. You can buy this from most online retailers, but it's got 6-inch squares in it. You can see behind me here the squares on that trellis and how easy it is to reach through it. And finally, you need something to help your plants adhere to that trellis. Now, if it's a naturally vining plant like a cucumber or a bean or a pea, it will naturally hold on to it. It might need a little help up front, but it should be okay. Tomatoes do not naturally send out tendrils that hold on to a trellis, so you have to give it some help. There's a number of different ways that you can do it. You can use little clips. You can use that old plastic green ties that you get in the that you can find at most garden centers. I prefer Velcro ties like this. It comes in a spool like this. You can find this at most online retailers as well, some garden centers, and then you can cut it to size. The nice thing about this is it's reusable from season to season, and all you have to do is wrap it around and it holds like Velcro. It holds very tight. You can readjust it, you can move it around. When you no longer need it, you can easily take it off. It's soft on the inside so it doesn't bother your plants. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you what this looks like. I'm going to install a vertical trellis right here, show you how easy it is, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Be right back. Pretty easy once you have the whole thing built. All you need is the conduit bender to make a nice curve in the conduit like this, a coupler right here, and once you've built the frame, then you put the netting on, tying it together where it meets the conduit. These are very sturdy and will hold up to any winds that we have or that we have had in the last 4 years. No, I've been using these for 5 years here. And you can see that the nylon netting holds up really well. It's really easy to be able to reach through and get produce, so it makes it very easy for me to do that or adjust any of my plants on here. It just makes things much easier. Airflow moves through, less disease, less pests because you can notice them and pick them off, and so can the birds, so they can come by here. That makes it, they have less defensive mechanisms because they can't hide as easily. And you can notice your vegetables when they become ripe, and you can pick them a lot easier. It makes it all easier. And each one of these takes 2 pieces of 10-foot conduit. You cut it and you put this on it, you bend it, you put the coupler on it, you tie it together, and it works out rather nicely. One of the other things that I'd like to show you is how you can provide support for your peppers. Peppers are a great plant. They start off, you can see that I've staked each one of them up, but once they start getting bigger, and you can see some of them already have peppers set on them, once they start getting bigger, those peppers are going to get pretty heavy. It's going to want to pull it over, and if you don't do anything to support it, that weight of the pepper is going to pull it over and maybe even snap off part of the plant or break it. So you can get a cage and put it in here, but that would be a lot of cages in here across my whole garden. I've got an easier technique. All you have to do is put a garden stake at each one of the corners of your garden, then take this netting and spread it off horizontally over your raised bed. It will grow up through that, and this netting will provide the foundation to help keep everything in place and keep it from too much sideways stress that might cause something to break off. It'll give it the support that you need for the peppers. I'll show you how I do that right now. Pretty simple, huh? All you have to do is spread that out, and now if you'll notice, the peppers can grow up through there, and that will prevent any side-to-side stress on the peppers. It'll both provide support for when they set fruit, and that fruit gets heavy and it wants to pull it to the side, or if there's wind and it wants to push the pepper to the side and damage the pepper. The nice thing about this is I can still reach through here and get to the fruit without any problem. Makes it all easy, and you're not going to hurt yourself on this nylon. It's very soft and it's soft to the touch. Those are the basics behind vertical gardening and support for your peppers. This vertical gardening technique works really well for the tomatoes. It also works very well for the cucumbers. I'll be putting up a vertical trellis back here for my cucumbers, for my beans over here, and I'm going to be replacing my sugar snap peas as they die out with the warmer weather with some beans that are going to grow up there right in front of my beehives to help the bees fly up and not straight out through my garden. Pretty simple. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you have other ideas that you'd like me to address in future videos, please leave those down there as well. And thank you for coming back to my garden.